Leslie Headland is the creator and executive producer for the upcoming Star Wars Disney Plus series, The Acolyte. She is also a writer and director for the series. Comments that she has made have been viciously twisted by an indoctrinated and agenda-driven campaign based solely on her identity as a woman. In 2019, Leslie penned an article for The Hollywood Reporter based on unraveling and analyzing the auteur myth in Hollywood and how it is oftentimes, but not always, misogynistic. She gives two examples in the article: how Bob Fosse's legacy hid and buried the importance of Gwen Verdon, and the treatment of Woody Allen's ex-wife, Mia Farrow. Not once in the article does she mention Star Wars or George Lucas, and she concludes her article by saying, and I quote, "Empowering another person doesn't take something away from you. It's not good enough that the industry is pushing for inclusion. You have to take a look at your own work behavior, your own Fossism. You're not an auteur. You're another bozo on the bus. Send the elevator back down." End quote. This is objectively true. We currently have a writer's strike, an actor's strike, and even visual effects groups are attempting to now unionize. Everyone is desperately trying to receive the credit they deserve. The Hollywood industry often refuses to acknowledge and properly credit hundreds of individuals who work on beloved IP. Star Wars is a criminal to this as well. Let's step outside the fandom. The general audience does not know the names of Ralph McQuarrie, Lee Brackett, Irvin Kershner, Joe Johnston, John Dijkstra, Doug Chang, John Knoll, Phil Tippett, Rob Coleman, even Lawrence Kasdan. The list goes on exponentially. No one acknowledges the characters and concepts Lucas took from the expanded universe, from creators like John Ostrander, Jan Duursema, Timothy Zahn, and Tom Vey. George Lucas's Star Wars was built by thousands of creative and passionate individuals, and demystifying the auteur myth is based entirely around the objective truth that none of these beloved films and visual franchises were created by one person or one man. This is especially relevant because Lawrence Kasdan is often credited with the brilliance of The Empire Strikes Back, and the wonderful and talented Leigh Brackett has been effectively erased, even though she was the original screenwriter and Kasdan made minimal changes to her script. The article was effectively ignored. Hollywood was not pleased with Headland's statements because it would mean giving people fair credit and fair pay, and that's a no-no. The Star Wars fandom paid it no mind, effectively. On the 20th of June, 2019, after the publication of the Hollywood Reporter article, Leslie Headland was interviewed by IndieWire's Filmmaker Toolkit. The relevant part of the interview begins at the 36-minute and 53-second mark of the podcast. Leslie goes on to say, and I'll quote, "You see the evolution of the idea from what George is trying to express to Ralph McQuarrie to what Ralph puts down on the piece of paper." End quote. And she is right. George was renowned for coming into a room with various pieces of art that he had no hand in creating and giving the ones he liked a fabuloso stamp of approval. This meant the concept would be taken and developed further into 3D maquettes and sculptures. Many people created the visual identity of Star Wars. My best example is Darth Maul. Lucas told the art team to create a villain from their worst nightmares. Nothing more specific. It was someone else's imagination that created the visual identity of Darth Maul, specifically the artist Ian McCaig. Leslie concludes her thoughts here, and I quote, "The idea that this only came from George Lucas, that only George Lucas holds the key for what we understand to be Star Wars, is just untrue." End quote. In 2020, Headland was hired to work on the upcoming Disney Plus series The Acolyte, and the article and the subsequent podcast interview remained ignored. For 4 years, while she publicly worked on The Acolyte, no one cared to dig through her interviews. But a lot has changed in 4 years. We have seen the rise of radicalized content creation designed specifically to enrage isolated young men and blame women for all of their problems and perceived slights. We watched creators build echo chambers of hate and sexism. We've seen an increase in sexual assaults and rape in the United States alone. Men are being indoctrinated to hate women because it generates clicks and because it earns the creator money. No one is stopping to think what the effects of this grift will have on society. In a drought of news, disgusting channels, desperate to cling to their hate-filled audience, sought out and dug up old interviews from the female showrunner of an upcoming Star Wars series. They twisted her words and took her entire message out of context, and their audience ate it up like the echo chamber they exist in. These men do not understand the outside world. They look no further for proof, and they do not question the authority of their favorite content creators, and I use that term very lightly. These men do not understand Star Wars. They are not fans. They do not understand what George Lucas created. They do not understand the message. These men have failed Star Wars, and they are an embarrassment to the fandom. Star Wars: The Acolyte is not canceled. It was never in fear of being canceled. That story was fabricated to attack the prominent women involved in the production. Leslie has never called Lucas sexist or misogynistic. She has never accused Lucas of any wrongdoing. If you believe the sexist and hateful messages, if you ignore reality, then you are lost. In the description below, you'll find all the relevant links that were referenced in this video. May the Force be with you, always.